the people in the film. I'll start with the far end of the table. It's a pleasure to have Sergi and López together with us here today. And amongst the 96 titles with IMDb, there are 4 co-productions with Arnaud de Pallières. We have the producer, Sergi. He came to Cannes with films like Waltz with Bashir. And the other producer, Martina Haubrich, this is her second co-production with Sergi. Last year she was here. There were the Holy Motors, 12 rows that got a Caesar for Best Actor. And this time round, he speaks for God. He's the representative of God on earth. Denis Lavant, the theologian in the film. Arnaud de Pallières, who is the director and writer, but also the editor, which is not very common. Like Denis, he's here for the second consecutive year. Last year, he played in The Hunt and got the prize for Best Performance as an actor. He's often seen on the screen. He is a star in an American TV series, Hannibal, Mads Mikkelsen. And we have one of Arnaud's favorite actresses. She's already been in Park with him as Judith Kohlhaas. We have Delphine, Chuillot. Arnaud, I'll start by asking you a question. When one goes to see an unknown film, one has all sorts of ideas in mind. What are you going to see? What's it going to be like? Thinking about Michael Kohlhaas as a character, one might believe that this is a representative of modern times or a precursor of Occupy Wall Street. He might even be viewed as a terrorist. That is an oversimplification, however. That's not at all an accurate view. For you, who is Michael Kohlhaas and how do you view this character? It's a novella, of course. How did you approach this person? I'll try to give you a very simple answer. I made the film because I was wondering about exactly what you've asked. And to be very sincere, I don't really know the answer even today. It's very difficult to judge the character Michael Kohlhaas. When I read the book, the novella by Kleist, I found things were very subtle, very sophisticated, and this is portrayed in Mads Mikkelsen's way of acting out the character. I don't think there's just one answer to your question. There is one answer per spectator. Each spectator will judge Kohlhaas in his or her own way. A terrorist, someone meting out justice, a revolutionary. Each spectator will take a stance as to who Michael Kohlhaas is or was, and that lay at the heart of my project. It's not a recent dream, of course, to make a film out of Kleist's novella. It's something you've been thinking about for a long time. I discovered the novella when I was very young. I was just beginning to study the cinema, and I was overwhelmed by the text. I found it stunning. I didn't, of course, at that age fully understand it. I didn't perceive the full complexity. One or two episodes really marked me. I've always thought of this text. I've kept thinking about this story ever since that time. I had the feeling that I probably neither had the strength or the requisite maturity to really make the novella into something good. And it wasn't easy to turn this into a film. The novella had to be transformed, changed, and it had to be really striking as a film. At a given point in time, I thought perhaps that the time was ripe to make the film, and I wanted us all to make it together. This decision was taken with Sergi Lalo. I'd already spoken to him about this project, and I said, well, are we going to do it? And together we said, yes, let's forge ahead. We had absolutely no idea about the actual kind of film that we were going to make. The actors have already worked with Arnaud. What's it like working with him? Were you attracted to the character, or were you attracted by the idea of doing another film with Arnaud? Delphine, what would you like to say? How can I put this? I love what Arnaud does. I like his work, and I accept without even thinking about it when he offers me a part. For me, Park was an outstanding experience. I didn't know whether I'd had a further opportunity to work with him, and when he said, well, I've written something for you, I was absolutely flabbergasted, and he offered me this part. It's a wonderful gift. Thank you. Sergi? I agree with everything she said. It's a privilege for me to work with Arnaud de Pallières. It's a tremendous privilege. It's one hell of a story. It's a fabulous tale. The screenplay is excellent. The script is very well written. It's hard to judge the character. It's disturbing, upsetting. It's all sorts of things at once. But he has tremendous talent. Despite my ignorance, he manages to always find the right way to help the actors portray their parts. Serge, I'd like to tell you a little tale. After 2 days working on Park, Arnaud was furious with the rushes. Sergei didn't know him. He said, well, this is crazy. We can't do this with the actors. And Sergei said, well, for once we are finally projecting the rush, we can really discuss matters in depth.
Hi, this is Rodrigo Fonseca from Global Brazil. A question to Mads. Mads, how did you prepare to play this role physically? What did you research to build up the character of Michael? And how do you analyze your comeback to Cannes 1 year after the prize for The Hunt? Thank you.
Yes. That was a lot of questions. Let's start. Preparation for any film always starts with the director and the script. For me, it's very important that we, to a certain degree, are on the same page when we start. We don't necessarily have to be on the same page, but we have to have addressed it and talked about it. And what fascinated me very much with Arnaud when I met him the first time in Copenhagen, I loved the script already at that time, and I had a few suggestions. And normally when you have the first meeting and you come with your suggestions, the director would say, yes, that's very, very interesting, let's have a look at it. But Arnaud said, no, no. And he kept saying no to all my suggestions. And I found not only the script was really radical, I found that Arnaud was extremely radical. And he had an answer for all the questions I had. So my preparation was with Arnaud. Obviously, I had to learn to write. I had to learn to speak French to a degree. So that was a lot of preparation there. But as I normally say, that's push-ups. The real work is with the script and with the director and the fellow actors. 1 year after Cannes, I love being here. I think we should make it a tradition.
There was a, sir.
Bonjour, le Dauphiné, France.
La Dauphiné, France. I have two questions to Arnaud de Pallières. Not so much about the adaptation, but the transposition of this German novella. You've turned it into a French story. I have two questions about this transposition. First of all, how can you make things coherent? Did you wonder about this? We're talking about a very international film, both in terms of shooting, and you were shooting for an international public that would be discovering this story through different accents, people from different countries. And in this transposition, how did you decide to convey the historical information to the French public, for example, which may know very little, if anything at all, about the original story, which is the opposite in Germany. So, how did you decide to portray all these historical elements where the action is set? You've asked me about the transposition of the novella. I'll try to give you a simple answer. I'm neither German nor particularly knowledgeable about German culture, so I felt that I simply had to shoot the film in French. That seemed fairly obvious to me. I wanted to find a good place, a good location, which would resemble the place in the actual story and fit in with the characters. So the south of France, the Cévennes, seemed a good choice, plus the Vercors. I didn't want to spend too much time or energy thinking about the historical reconstitution. I just give some clues to the spectators, some clues as to the actual time when the story took place. But that's all I do. What I've tried to achieve is to focus on the real reason, the deep reason why I chose this tale. It's the human element, which runs through the ages. It's as modern and contemporary as historical, and it applies both to Kleist's time and modern times. Hence, what I wanted to focus on was the characters and the values they embody. That's what really interested us. I just evoke the historical period. I give some minimum details. Now, as to the consistency of the casting, I think people are often very conservative in the way they view a historical film. There's absolutely no reason to think that languages and people didn't move around as much as during the Renaissance as now. People traveled a lot in the Middle Ages. There was a lot of trade. There were different languages. People spoke and knew a lot of languages. I looked into this with my co-writer. There were a lot of languages, dialects. People were much more familiar with the idea of meeting people who spoke different languages, perhaps even more so than today. So I felt that it was wonderful to be able so freely to look for actors in different countries. The only actors I ruled out were American actors. But all sorts of accents could be accommodated in this kind of a film. It was a great pleasure to therefore choose German actors, a Catalan actor, and so on. I believe, and the outstanding example of this is the scenes with Sergi. I offered this part to Sergi as a kind of a tribute, perhaps. And I said he must only speak Catalan in the film, the idea being that everyone would understand him.
Et nous, aujourd'hui, nous avons
And
besoin de sous-titres.
we need subtitles today.
Il y avait une question plus en avant de ce côté. Non, c'est fait, d'accord. Denis, vous jouez le rôle de Martin
Denis,
Luther.
you're Martin Luther.
C'est un mélange.
It's a bit of a mixture, in fact, the character. He's a Protestant. He's a Protestant extremist, if you like. But he also rises up in revolt against the Vatican. Yet he seems to side with the establishment, the powers that be in this film. How do you explain this part? I can't explain it.
Vous savez, pour raconter un peu la genèse de la manière dont je suis entré dans ce film,
how did I come to play this part in the film? He's a character who's a bit like Calvin. I met Arnaud before the shooting, and initially he offered me a more major part without any dialogue and a lot of riding. Now, I'm not a very good rider myself. I started to try and learn to ride with Mr. Celebrin, who's present here. I was very enthusiastic about it. It was thrilling. I knew Kohlhaas, and it was a pleasure to play a part in this story. It was actually quite funny. It took me back 2 years. The shooting was at the same time as Holy Motors, which was selected competing here last year. Holy Motors, well, I was totally committed. I threw myself body and soul into the project. So I had to turn down the proposal to play Caesar. And Arnaud wanted us, perhaps, to talk about things together. And he was very kind. He entrusted me with the role of Calvin, this kind of Calvin in the film. And it's crazy. I swapped a character on a horse where I would have had to learn to ride, and I didn't have anything to say. That might have been easier, perhaps. I swapped that for a character who didn't have to ride, but who had a lot of things to say. There was a lot of dialogue. He was a Protestant, and there were some very intense scenes with Michael Kohlhaas to try and make him change his mind and put down his arms, his weapons. So I worked a lot on the part myself. It's a bit like a theatrical play. Of course, I'm more used to working with dialogue than with horses. When we shot this, things fitted in beautifully between two shooting scenes in Holy Motors. So acting as Calvin, it was like a cherry on the cake, in fact. I went from one part to the other, and all of a sudden I ended up in the Vercors, dressed up as a Protestant. I don't know. I don't have any specific method when I prepare a character. I was fully aware of the importance of every word this man said. I didn't plunge into the Protestant Bible. What I did was to make the most of circumstance, the place. And Arnaud's directing, of course. Things were very theatrical. This man suddenly turned up amongst the rebels, and he confronted the head of this little revolution. And so I got to work for 3 days in that context. Of course, I loved the screenplay, and I enjoyed working with the director. I managed to throw myself fully into the story. What about the lighting? That was quite unusual for most of the actors here. There's a lot of scenes during twilight, in the shadows. It's hard to play without projectors, without much light. It's very different, of course, when you're outside and not in a studio. Mads, you already did that.
Magnificent nature as well. Does that give you more?
Say again.
Sorry, I'm thinking of Valhalla Rising, where another film which takes place in magnificent nature and very remote, sparse settings. Does that feed you as an actor?
I think it feeds us. I think it makes things easy in the sense that we're there, the weather is there, the horses are there, the mountain is there. And we can, to a certain degree, lean into the story. We don't have to wait for a lamp or a wire to be pulled. We can shoot when we want to shoot. And if it's raining, that's what we do today. If it's sunny, that's what we do today. I think most actors enjoy being in the present like that. And it was certainly a gift for this film, which is taking place out in the nature.
Thank you. I have a question on this side. I'm not sure who's in the front row.
Yes, hello, my name is Jesper. I'm from Danish newspaper Berlingske. 2 questions for Mads. Could you talk a bit more about how it was to play a movie in French, preparing for playing in French? And when you see the movie, it feels like it is a very personal movie to you also. Maybe you could talk a bit about that too.
I think the movie became very personal to all of us. We were together for a long time. We prepared for a long time as well. As I said before, it's a radical part. It's a radical story, and I think we approached it quite radical. We saw each other yesterday for the first time in 1.5 years, but it was as if we haven't left each other because we spent so much intense time together. Working in French is obviously very, very difficult when you're Danish. We made a pact that I would work as much as I could, constantly, non-stop. And when we were shooting the scenes, we will not talk about it anymore. That was it. And that was the deal, and we kept it, because obviously as an actor you have to be free. You have to be free of the words. It's like wearing a hat. But this hat was very difficult to wear, so it was a lot of work. But I think we did it the right way. We tried to make a space where I could do what I'm hopefully best at, be present in the moment and not think so much about the words. But it was hard, but we did it.
Delphine,
Delphine, a question to you. Is it the first time you portrayed an historical character? Do you prepare differently for that kind of a part? It's not the first time. Of course, there was Mozart by René Ferré. So, no, I didn't approach my work differently, thinking that this is an historical film, although my costumes were extremely beautiful. No, I felt there was nothing different. Perhaps because we all knew that Arnaud, as he said earlier on, didn't want the film to be viewed as an historical film particularly, so it was better not to think too much about it. Mathilde Sauvesek, France Net Info. I have 2 questions. One for Mads Mikkelsen. I'd like to know, last year you came for The Hunt, where you played a part of a character who suffered from injustice. It's the same case here. There's a lot of injustice. Is that a subject dear to your heart? Second question to the director. I think the music creates a special atmosphere in the film. How did you choose the music, particularly in the final scene? I think the music is quite perfect. It really fits in with the images, so I want your views on that.
I will start. Yeah, you're right. It seems to be my destiny these days that injustice fall upon me. I think it's two very different things, though. I mean, in La Chasse, in The Hunt, it is a man who is wrongly accused of doing something he did not do. In this case, I'm bearing a lot of the guilt. Kohlhaas is becoming a blind man in his journey for justice. As we talked about before, whether we see him as a hero, a villain, or revolutionary, it's up to each individual. But he's definitely a very, very big part of his own journey. Music.
Ça me fait très plaisir votre question.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question about the music. I've been working with Martin Bliller for quite some time now, and we worked hard on the music. A young group called the Witches specializes in popular old music. And when reading through the screenplay, he made a proposal because he thought that we might draw on the Japanese cinema. We both love Kurosawa's cinema, and he was struck by the anti-sentimentalism of percussion in Japanese music in certain films. And he sensed that this was perhaps a good idea to use the percussion. In the initial project, we didn't want to have historical music. The idea was to move towards something very contemporary. Percussion is widely used in contemporary music. Martin then started working with the Witches and worked in his way. He does a lot of computer music, electronic music, but he worked using their instruments, these old instruments, which he recorded, and he then recomposed the music. There are a couple of melodies which come from the Witches, and they are played by the Witches. Martin wasn't actually involved, particularly the one you're referring to right at the end of the film. And what we have is a sort of an osmosis, a meeting between very contemporary musics, a very contemporary approach to music, and this Baroque classical music. The idea was that the music should be fairly discreet and relatively austere. How can I put this? The music wasn't supposed to be dictating to the spectators the kind of feeling or emotion they should have. It was just supposed to accompany the story, which is fairly brutal. I don't know whether I've answered your question.
Merci.
Thank you. Teresa Corseau, German TV. I have two questions for Arnaud de Pallières. First of all, you said that there were two things that impressed you in Kleist's novella. Could you tell us what they were? Second question, Mads Mikkelsen said he found you fairly radical. Do you agree with that? Are you a bit like Kohlhaas? Two things. Yes. But there's one thing above all. Well, let's put it this way. The first image that I had in my mind is one that occurs in the middle of the story. If I had forgotten most of the tale of Michael Kohlhaas, what I did remember is this man who was rising in revolt. He was conducting a revolution. He was about to take over a whole province, perhaps the size of a country. He suddenly gives up and disbands his army out of a sense of moral rigor, because he said, well, yes, you're right. And Kleist says this in just one line in his novella. Obviously, that disappoints the reader, who is carried away by the heroic character. But I think this is the most beautiful historical tale one could ever tell. A man who could gain power, but who, through a sense of honesty and rigorousness, decides to give up that potential power. This reminds me of another story, another thing that takes place during the Commune in Paris. People who were elected by the people of Paris took power for 2 days and then went away because they felt that power was actually a burden, and they gave this power up. That's the first thing that really struck me and affected me deeply. That's perhaps the most deep-seated reason for adapting this novella. And then you have the character of Kohlhaas. I'm deeply moved by the character. I intervened a lot in terms of the character written by Kleist because he embodied the spirit of romanticism. And this is something that I'm not. I don't identify with. Kleist's Kohlhaas is almost crazy. He's mad. He becomes almost crazy. He pushes himself to the forefront all the time and becomes a kind of a tyrant. He's crazed by the ideas that move him. I couldn't have portrayed that kind of a Kohlhaas in my film because he's too far away from what I am. So I wanted to portray someone who's not crazy, who's very down to earth. And that's what I asked Mads to portray. Mads kept saying, well, he's mad, he's crazy. Or he said, what do you think? Is he crazy when he does that? And each time I said, no, he's not crazy, he's not mad. And I didn't want him to appear crazy in the film. There's another thing. There's another time in the film and in the novella by Kleist which really moves me very deeply. That's one of the other reasons why I wanted to make the film, in fact. Kleist, in his novella, says that at the very same time he learns that he's going to be given his horses back, so he will achieve justice, but he'll have to pay for this justice with his own life. Kleist describes the joy on his face, and I find that incredible. I would even say that these two moments, which we kept in the film, I wanted to ensure that these very grave, very serious moments would also be very dignified. The character stands up straighter, he stands taller, and the way Mads portrays this time is fantastic. When he gets his horses back, it's as though he was reconciled with himself, as though he got himself back. And that is where one might say there's madness in the character. He's prepared to feel this joy and pride, yet he knows that he's going to have to pay this with his life, not only his life, but also he'll be separated from his daughter. Are you a kind of Kohlhaas yourself? Are you a real radical? Well, I answered this in part. I'm not crazy. I'm not mad, even if some people who work with me think I may be on occasion. It's interesting what you have said. One shouldn't always listen to the first ideas made by people with whom you work. The first suggestion by the person responsible for the casting was that I play the part myself. Why? Well, because of the reasons I explained earlier on. I started by feeling that I was very close to the story. And because I felt very close to the character, I wanted to ensure that Mads felt close to the character too. And this actually made us feel very close when we were working together because we were able to empathize with this character. He said I was radical. Well, am I radical? I'm radical because we were also deeply committed to the film. In that sense, yes, I was radical. We have the princess, for example. And the actress who portrayed the princess spent time with us for 3 days shooting these scenes. And she said, I was deeply impressed by the atmosphere on the set. And I said, why? She said, she paid me a compliment. She said, it was like working with Hanukkah, the white ribbon. She said, people were so committed, so totally concentrated, yet very calm at the same time. And I think that we all really wanted to do our best. We worked hard. We all knew that this was a film which would be physically demanding. Mads didn't say this, but everybody shot in difficult circumstances. It was cold or unbearably hot. The physical conditions were rough. They were really tough. And I would say that everybody suffered physically even doing the film. But I hope that the film will really convey this, the harsh conditions. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ole Kolter from TV2 in Denmark. I had 2 questions for Ms. Mikkelsen. I would like to hear your opinion about Michael Kohlhaas. Is he a hero or is he a terrorist? And my second question is this movie only about the past or is there anything we could learn from it today?
I will start with the later question, the latter. I think the reason why Arnaud finds this story interesting and why we found it interesting is that we are people of today and we recognize ourselves in it. I do not want to go one-to-one with the story, but obviously there are people out there fighting for justice. Some are doing it one way, some are doing it the other way. So I think it's an everlasting subject, an everlasting dilemma. Do I find him a hero or a villain or a revolutionary? Well, playing him, giving life to the character, obviously I'm defending him. When I go home, I can take that hat off and I can analyze him. I think he's radical. I don't think he's either. He's a radical man. He does believe in justice. And justice is, give me back my horses. And you can interpret that from now on until Christmas, and you can come up with a lot of solutions, but he's a radical man. And during that radical journey, he loses everything. But he's still happy. That's radical.
Une question avant de la salle, monsieur.
Bonjour,
Manuel Lucet, France Bleu Isère, Télé Grenoble. I have a question to Arnaud de Pallières. You talked about the importance of the natural settings. You mentioned the Vercors. This is a very symbolical place in terms of resistance. Did that play a part in your choice? Also, the regions, the Rhône-Alpes cinema, helped perhaps with the editing of your film. So I'll answer your first question, and then I'd be very pleased if Serge could answer your second question. What interests me in the landscapes and in the natural settings is not so much the fact that they're beautiful or picturesque. What I want is that they convey feelings, emotions, and those of the character to boot. I chose these places because for me, this story at the outset takes place in Germany. In fact, to be precise, it takes place on the outskirts of Berlin. In fact, it takes place in Berlin. So we thought about the matter. Martina, who is the co-producer and who lives in Berlin, said to me, well, she showed me some pictures and she proposed certain places, but they didn't seem quite right. They weren't quite right because I couldn't shoot the film in a flat landscape, in a sort of a reasonable landscape.
Il y avait, pour moi, c'est aussi une manière de me rapprocher. Il y a tout un pan de mon travail qui consiste à
A lot of my work consists in betraying Kleist, maybe to serve him better. But at the same time, I tried to respect the spirit of Kleist, that is, his revolt, his feeling that he was being totally torn apart, and the romantic atmosphere. In the historical and literary sense of the term, of course. And these mountains, the landscapes in the Vercors and the Cévennes area, they felt more fitting. I felt that they could better portray Kleist's feelings and the feelings of the character himself. That is why, therefore, I chose these locations. Okay, the Vercors played an important part in the resistance. It's a familiar place, but that didn't really count. What counts is what you actually see. The landscapes aren't labeled the Vercors. It was very moving, of course, for us to be there. I hope I've answered your question. This film was very complex to put together. It's a Franco-German co-production. In the French cinema, the regions play an important part. Ronalp Cinema gave us support for Arnaud's preceding film, The Park, and they played a decisive part in this film as well. This was decisive from beginning to end. It was a lengthy production. They provided a lot of support right through to the end. You can clearly see that there are two regions in the film, and the regions play an important part in filmmaking in France. They play an important part. They help these films to be made. Likewise, one can develop production in the regions themselves. That's a further factor. One can help develop this activity in the regions. It's a model more similar to that of Germany. I'd like to remind you of what you said. You said traveling in space and traveling in time.
Rodrigo from Globo again. It's again a question to Mads. You are here in Cannes with a strong cinematic movie experience. This one with Arnaud. It's a movie really well done. That has the signature, strong artistic signature. And at the same time, you are doing TV with a really popular character, this Hannibal. How do you analyze those two totally different experiences in this point of your career, this point of great success of your career?
I don't really analyze it, to be honest. I make some choices, and where they take me is quite surprising sometimes for me as well. I think I've been very fortunate that I could work back home, I could work in Europe, and I've been able to work to a certain degree in the States as well. I don't sit down and plan, now I want to make a small project, and now I want to make a big American thing. I've kind of like taken it step by step my whole life, and it's taken me somewhere. And so my planning my career has never been a big thing in my life. I believe in doing the things I like to do, and eventually it will become some kind of career. So where I land is often very by chance.
I didn't want you to put the question about the adaptation or transposition of the novella, but why did you turn the prince into a princess? For two main reasons. First,
On s'est dit avec ma co-scénariste que
with my co-writer, we thought there weren't enough women in the film.
Je dirais que ça c'est le premier.
That is the first reason.
On changeait des personnages à chaque fois qu'on avait une
Every
possibilité.
time
On se posait toujours la
we
question,
could,
est-ce que
we
ce personnage-là, on peut
wondered
faire une femme?
whether we couldn't turn this or that character into a woman.
Donc ça a été le premier, voilà, le premier. Et le deuxième
That
était
was the
que,
first reason. The second reason
le personnage de Kohlhaas
is that Kohlhaas, as a
également
character,
d'interlocuteur féminin.
needed a female counterpart. And I therefore was keenly interested in having a scene where there would be a sort of confrontation
En plus d'être une confrontation
with the
politique,
prince. It's a
c'était
political confrontation,
une confrontation érotique.
but I wanted it to be a sort of an erotic confrontation as well.
Enfin, en tout cas, d'un rapport homme-femme.
I wanted there to be a man-woman relationship.
Comment dire, est devenu, en tout cas moi je l'ai fait travailler aux acteurs.
I got the actors to work on the scene in this way. I wanted it to become fairly erotic as a scene.
Le personnage de Kohlhaas avait besoin
Kohlhaas, as a
de
character, needed
en plus, je trouvais
to
intéressant
meet a woman.
que la figure
And I
de
thought that
pouvoir,
the figurehead of power should perhaps
qu'il est l'homme
be
de pouvoir pendant presque tout le temps du film. Il n'a presque
a woman.
personne à sa hauteur.
Kohlhaas is the man in power throughout the film, yet,
L'intellectuel, qui est le théologien.
and we have the theologian as well, who's a man, portrayed by Denis Lavant.
Exactement, ni Calvin,
He's
ni
neither
Luther.
Calvin nor Luther. He's a mixture of Calvin and Luther, in fact.
C'était bien de dire à Denis pour travailler que c'était Calvin.
It was fine to say to Denis, he's like Calvin. That was closer to Denis, perhaps, in terms of speaking French. But Calvin actually says things that Luther stated in the film.
Il est intéressant,
I think it's interesting to see that Luther
extrêmement dur.
had very, very harsh things to say. He was a kind of revolutionary at his time as well, and he said very, very harsh things about peasant revolts and uprisings.
Et alors que lui-même
Yet he himself
un temps quelqu'un qui avait lutté
had been someone who rose up to fight power during the peasant uprisings. In fact, he sided with the princes. It was very interesting to be able to use what he said, and Kleist drew inspiration from this. We went to look up what Luther actually said, and then the character says these very same words. The idea being intellectually to show what he was striving to do, i.e. reverse Kohlhaas's plans. So we have this character, he's a man. And from a dramatic stance, I thought that it would be good to have a second confrontation. The second character is very powerful and manages to dominate Kohlhaas. And I wanted that character to be a woman. Moreover, a very, very young woman. In other words, she is someone who's learning how to be a princess.
Arnaud, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Arnaud, and I'd like to thank the whole team. Thank you for coming to talk